Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going straight into, well, one of the most intellectually and I think spiritually challenging conversations ever recorded.
We really are. We're tackling a dilemma that feels incredibly modern, but it's ancient. What happens when you see just overwhelming systemic evil taking root?
And when injustice is running rampant and the one power you believe is responsible for justice seems, well, just utterly silent.
That's the core of it. We're doing a deep dive into the Book of Habakkuk. It's only 3 chapters long, but it contains this explosive dialogue.
It really is. It feels less like a prophecy and more like a confrontation, an exchange between a prophet who is demanding answers and a divine power that reveals a pretty shocking geopolitical solution.
It's a journey. It really is. It moves from, total despair and frustration to one of the most radical affirmations of unconditional faith you'll ever read.
And our sources for this deep dive, they really get into the historical context, the theological arguments, and the astonishing historical implications of this short text.
Right. It connects this ancient problem to truths that thinkers have been using for centuries.
So our mission for you, the learner, isn't just to, summarize what's happening. We want to understand the profound emotional and intellectual journey Habakkuk goes on.
And why his final conclusion became such an unshakable anchor for faith and for endurance and justice through the ages.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to set the stage. We need to understand the geopolitical catastrophe that's just unfolding all around the prophet.
Exactly. So we're in the kingdom of Judah. The timeline is somewhere between 608 and 605 BC, and this is a time of just immense volatility.
And the prophet's name, Habakkuk. The sources say it's linked to the Hebrew word for embrace.
Yeah, which could mean a few things. One who embraces or one who grasps. Maybe he's embracing truth or his people in their suffering. Or maybe he's literally wrestling with God, embracing him until he gets an answer.
And he's not just a messenger, right? The book is structured like poetry. A psalm, even.
He was a skilled poet, no question, which makes the rawness of his complaint even more powerful.
Okay, so the timing, this is absolutely critical. This is not the powerful Judah of King David or Solomon.
Not at all. Any hope of religious revival has just been slammed shut. The great reformer, King Josiah, he was killed in battle in 609 BC.
And his death was basically the end of any real attempt at moral or religious restoration.
It was. Now his son, Jehoiakim, is on the throne, and his reign is just. It's marked by corruption, impiety, and a massive decline in national ethics.
And the historical background is just crushing, isn't it?
It is. The northern kingdom of Israel. I mean, they were wiped out by the Assyrians way back in 722 BC. And for Judah, that's this constant, terrifying reminder of what could happen to them.
They're living in dread, caught in what you called a geopolitical pressure cooker.
That's exactly what it is. They're surrounded by these huge, aggressive empires, all fighting for supremacy.
And the biggest, most terrifying threat on the horizon is the rise of the Neo-Babylonians, the Chaldeans.
Yes. And their rise was rapid and just relentless. The sources show this Neo-Babylonian empire started its climb with Nabopolassar back in 626 BC, but by the time Habakkuk is writing, they're not just a threat anymore.
They're a cataclysm, a force of nature sweeping across the entire region.
Their dominance was sealed by one pivotal event, the Battle of Carchemish.
Right, which happened just before 605 BC.
And in that battle, the Babylonians defeated the combined forces of Egypt and what was left of the once mighty Assyrian Empire.
So that victory wasn't just about winning a battle, it was a statement.
It was. It confirmed Babylon as the undisputed superpower. The Assyrian dynasty was over. And for Judah, the threat was no longer theoretical. The monster was at the gates.
Which brings us to Judah's, their fatal mistake, strategically.
It really was. Instead of seeing this as a spiritual crisis, a time to repent and rely on their covenant with the Lord, they started looking for help in all the wrong places.
Trying to make alliances with these defeated powers like Egypt and Assyria.
Exactly. Instead of anchoring themselves to their primary allegiance. And this is so crucial because that failure links the external threat directly to the internal decay that Habakkuk is about to scream about.
His contemporary, the prophet Jeremiah, was saying the same thing, wasn't he?
He was. You can't rely on shifting political alliances when your own internal moral structure is collapsing. That lack of reliance on God was the internal corruption.
Okay, so that brings us right to the prophet's first complaint, his outburst. And it feels so personal, so desperate. He's looking at his own community, his own neighbors, and he is just overwhelmed by the moral collapse he's seeing.
That's the key. It's not the Chaldeans that bother him first. It's the rot from within.
He's burdened by being a witness to it every single day.
And his prayer isn't some quiet petition. It is a cry of frustration, straight to Yahweh. He's demanding to know why God seems completely inactive. His words are just, they're visceral. How long, Lord, must I cry for help? But you do not listen.
I call out to you, violence, but you do not deliver. I mean, he sounds exhausted, like he's been shouting into a void for years.
He does. He feels that God is actively tolerating social injustice. The source material uses this phrase, that Yahweh puts up with wrongdoing.
Which suggests more than just tolerance. It's a kind of passivity that, to Habakkuk, must have felt like a betrayal.
A total betrayal of the covenant.
Yeah.
And the specific evils he lists, they paint a picture of just a complete ethical collapse.
We're talking destruction, strife, contention.
Yeah, these aren't isolated incidents. He says they're common, they're increasing, they're everywhere. It's the total disintegration of society.
And the most dangerous part of that is what it does to the legal system. If the powerful can just do whatever they want, then the law is meaningless.
That's his primary observation. He says the law lacks power and justice is never carried out.
Yeah.
The entire structure that was supposed to be protected by the Mosaic law is fundamentally broken.
So the wicked are intimidating the innocent and justice is being perverted.
Actively perverted.
Yeah.
The righteous have absolutely no recourse.
And he cries out, violence, that word. It's the same word used back in Genesis 6, right? To describe the corruption before the flood.
It is, and that's a deliberate choice. He's saying the whole system is so corrupt it's ripe for a catastrophic judgment. But all he gets is silence. Total corruption, divine silence.
And that silence is what's unbearable for him.
It's a profound crisis of faith for him. He believed in a God of action, a God of justice, this passivity in the face of just day-to-day wickedness that makes life unlivable for the vulnerable. He's demanding a timeline. When is justice coming?
And this is where the whole conversation takes this dramatic, almost terrifying twist. Habakkuk wants God to intervene against Judah's internal sin. You know, a nice, clean, surgical strike to fix the nation.
Right. But God answers, and the solution he proposes is, it's absolutely shocking. It's an intervention so brutal that no one would have believed it was possible.
The sources really emphasize that shock value. God says he's about to do something in the prophet's own lifetime that people would just flat out reject, even though they'd been warned.
They would. Because the Jews of that day, they were operating under this deep theological complacency. They believed that because they were the covenant people, God would never allow a Gentile, a non-covenant nation, to overrun Jerusalem and destroy the temple.
Even though there were clear warnings about foreign invasion in their own scriptures, going all the way back to Deuteronomy.
You just didn't believe it would ever happen to them.
But God's plan is just that. He says, I am about to empower the Babylonians, that ruthless and greedy nation.
The Babylonians, the Chaldeans, they would be the very rod of judgment. It's important to remember, the Chaldeans were Semites, but they were not Israel. God was raising up this specific nation to punish his own people for their unfaithfulness.
Just like he used Assyria a century before against the northern kingdom.
Exactly. Now it's Judah's turn, and Babylon is the instrument.
And the description of this conquering power is just designed to create terror.
Oh, absolutely. They're called aggressive, ruthless, greedy, sweeping across the earth, seizing dwelling places that don't belong to them.
That detail is fascinating, that even while they're God's instrument, their actions are still seen as fundamentally criminal.
Because they are. And they're described as frightening and terrifying, because they are, quite literally, a law unto themselves.
Yeah.
They live by rules they make up as they go.
The sources make this chilling comparison to modern totalitarian regimes, right? A state that just calls error truth and right wrong to suit its own purposes.
It's that same mentality, absolute self-determination, a total contempt for any established order, human or divine.
And their military might is described with this very visceral language, speed and ferocity.
Their horses are faster than leopards, more alert than wolves hunting in the desert at night. They swoop down like vultures to devour their prey.
Just this unstoppable force.
Unstoppable. Their warriors' faces are set on conquest. They mock kings. They laugh at rulers. Every fortified city is just another game to them.
Because they just build these massive siege ramps and take them easily.
Yeah, they take prisoners as easily as you'd scoop up sand. It's terrifying.
Yeah. But that raw power leads us right back to the theological problem. If God is just, Why grant so much success to a nation that is so unbelievably wicked?
And that is the question. The sources draw a careful distinction here. God is raising up Babylon to correct his people, not to annihilate them.
So it's a disciplinary action, not a final judgment on Judah.
Right. The covenant God, who had been their rock, now unleashes this terror precisely because his people refuse to fear him. But, and this is the key, the instrument isn't off the hook.
So even as they're fulfilling God's purpose, they're still going to face judgment themselves? How does that work?
God promises to hold them guilty. And the reason is fascinating. He says they will be held guilty because they worship their own strength.
Habakkuk 1.11, they charge their own strength as their God.
Exactly. They failed to recognize that the power they were wielding was just a temporary delegated authority from Yahweh. And that self-worship, that pride, is what seals their own doom.
Which leads directly into Habakkuk's second complaint, which is even deeper, theologically.
Much deeper. He's kind of accepted that Judah deserves punishment, but now he's asking, if God is perfectly holy, how can he use a nation that is exponentially more wicked to punish a nation that is, comparatively more righteous?
That is a devastating question. He's moved past frustration with silence to a real moral wrestling match with God's entire policy.
He is. He asks why God, who is too just to tolerate evil, would just stand by and say nothing while these treacherous Chaldeans devour those who are more righteous than they are.
This lack of interference with Babylon's excessive wickedness is what really baffles him, even more than God's initial silence about Judah's sin.
It feels like a betrayal of the fundamental laws of morality, like God is endorsing a greater evil to punish a lesser one. He's asking, are they just going to get away with this forever?
And he illustrates this moral chaos with this really powerful and chilling analogy, the fisherman analogy.
Yes, he says, God's allowed people to become like fish in the sea without a ruler, which is just, it's pure anarchy. Big fish eat little fish, and there's no one to stop them.
And the Babylonian tyrant is the fisherman.
The hyper-efficient, ruthless fisherman. He pulls up nations with a fish hook, hauls them in with a throw net, and when he catches them, he rejoices over his massive catch, with no remorse for the human cost.
But wait, I have to push on that. If God is the one who allowed the Babylonians to become the big fish here, doesn't that make him complicit in all this chaos?
That's the paradox Habakkuk is wrestling with. The sources reconcile it by highlighting the difference between temporary permission and ultimate endorsement. God is permitting the chaos for a specific corrective purpose.
But he's not endorsing their motives or their methods.
Not at all. He's using their inherent wickedness against them. The key is that the fisherman believes his own net, his own power, is what's giving him success. That's the ultimate spiritual crime.
And the historical details here are just brutal. Babylonian monuments actually show this, right? Hooks through the lips of captives.
Yes, stringing them up like fish on a line. It was a practice they inherited from the Assyrians. And their gods are shown dragging nets full of enemies. So this analogy isn't hyperbole for them. It was their worldview. Conquered people were just a catch.
Which brings us back to their self-worship.
Yeah.
After the conquest, they literally give credit to their tools, the net, the dragnet. They offer sacrifices to them.
Right. They credit the instruments of destruction rather than the ultimate source of power. And this is where, for you, the listener, this is the aha moment about what idolatry really is.
It's not just about statues.
Not at all. The sources make it clear. People today do the same thing. They pay homage to the business, the agency, the skill set that gave them their status. That becomes their constant obsession. It becomes their god.
So when your whole identity and focus is on the technology that made your company successful or the political strategy that got you elected.
That's the modern equivalent. It's a subtle but deadly form of idolatry where you worship the tool instead of the creator.
And seeing this cycle of violence and self-worship just continuing seemingly without consequence is what seems so unjust to Habakkuk. So he does something really profound.
He does. The vow to wait. In chapter 2, verse 1. He commits to this critical waiting. He says, I will stand at my watchpost. I will keep watching so I can see what he says to me.
He's not giving up. He's going to stand his ground and wait for God to answer this seemingly impossible paradox. He's demanding a clear answer.
Which is exactly what he gets.
Okay, so God replies to Habakkuk's waiting position. And the message he gives not only solves the immediate crisis, but it establishes this monumental theological truth that has echoed for millennia.
It really has. And the first instruction is so practical. He tells Habakkuk to write the message down, legibly, on tablets, so a messenger can read it easily while running.
Which provides certainty, right? This isn't a vague feeling, it's a written public decree about how things are going to turn out.
Exactly. But then comes the crucial part that addresses Habakkuk's impatience. God says, essentially, even if it seems slow, wait patiently for it. It will not arrive late.
So the timeline is divine, not human. It might feel late to us, but it's always on time.
That's the promise. And this patient waiting is tied directly to the core theological statement of the entire book, found in Habakkuk 2.4. This is the ultimate answer.
Let's really break this down. On one side, you have the unrighteous. The one whose desires are not upright will faint from exhaustion.
And on the other, the righteous. The person of integrity will live because of his faithfulness.
And this verse is it's so significant. It gets quoted 3 times in the New Testament, and each time it highlights a different aspect of the phrase.
It's incredibly profound. In Romans, Paul quotes it, "The righteous shall live by faith," to emphasize the word righteous. His point is that faith is the only way anyone can be declared righteous before God.
Then in Galatians, he uses it to stress the word live. New life, true spiritual existence comes from faith, not from trying to perform all the demands of the law.
And finally, the writer of Hebrews quotes it to stress the word faith itself, in the context of endurance. It's steadfast, enduring belief that God rewards as we wait for his promises.
So how does that apply back here in Habakkuk's original context?
Well, the Hebrew word used is emunah, and it means both trust in God and being faithful to God. It's trust and integrity combined.
So it's contrasting the trusting Israelites who endure with the proud, self-trusting Babylonians who are doomed.
Precisely. The assurance is that God will preserve those who maintain their integrity and trust through the coming oppression. Meanwhile, those with impure desires, like the greedy Babylonians, they have no spiritual anchor, so they won't withstand the final judgment.
And the focus then swings right back to the Babylonian tyrant. He's called the proud, restless man,
whose appetite is as big as Sheol's, like death. He's never satisfied. It's this image of an insatiable spiritual black hole.
And this hunger is fueled by wine, which the sources say is a metaphor for imperialistic success.
It is. The more they conquer, the more intoxicated they become, the greedier they get. It's like a drug that destroys all moral clarity. They believe they're invincible.
And that pride is what guarantees their failure.
It does. While the righteous are called to live by faith, waiting for the certain promise that this wicked empire will be destroyed.
Which brings us to God's specific sentence on Babylon. This is the concrete answer Habakkuk was waiting for.
This is it. Babylon must fall because they have violated God's design for justice. And the Lord lays it out in 5 specific woe statements. They're like taunts, pronouncements of judgment.
And this isn't just a theological idea. This was historically fulfilled when the Medes and Persians took Babylon in 539 BC.
It was. So let's break down these woes.
Okay, woe number 1. What's the specific crime?
Exploitation. Plain and simple. Accumulating what does not belong to them. Getting rich by extortion and violence, robbing other nations.
And the judgment.
It's perfect poetic justice. The nation that robbed and taunted will herself be robbed and taunted. The text is so direct, your creditors will suddenly attack, and they will rob you.
What goes around comes around, literally.
Exactly. Then you have woe number 2, self-exaltation.
This is about them using their stolen wealth to build this secure, self-sufficient dynasty, trying to build their nest way up high to escape disaster.
Right, trying to place themselves beyond the reach of any calamity, including God's judgment.
Well, that's doomed to fail.
Spectacularly. Their schemes will bring them shame. They destroyed many nations, so they will self-destruct. And the imagery here is amazing.
The stones in the walls will cry out.
And the wooden rafters will answer back. It means the very materials they built their empire with, materials gained through murder and oppression, will physically testify against them. The foundation itself is rotten.
Which leads right into woe number 3, oppression and bloodshed.
This is about the human cost, building cities with blood money. Their grand projects rested entirely on the blood, sweat, and tears of enslaved people.
And the judgment for that is futility.
Utter futility. All their hard work, all the nation's efforts will just go up in smoke. It's all for nothing. The ultimate statement on the vanity of self-glorification.
And this is contrasted with God's ultimate plan, that the earth won't be filled with the glory of Babylon, but with the recognition of the Lord's majesty.
Right. Just as the waters fill up the sea, the glory of the empire is temporary, the glory of Yahweh is eternal.
And you mentioned the symbolic meaning of Babylon here. is important.
It's vital. It's not just this one empire. Babylon represents all ungodly systems that rise up in self-reliance to glorify themselves. It's a spiritual struggle that continues.
Okay, on to woe number 4. Greediness and humiliation.
The sin here is the intentional, brutal degradation of their conquered neighbors. The text compares it to forcing them to drink intoxicating wine, to deceive and humiliate them, often by stripping them naked.
A policy of public humiliation to break their spirits.
Yes. And the judgment is a terrifying reversal. Instead of majesty, Babylon will become drunk with shame. Now it's their turn to drink the cup of wine from the Lord's right hand. Disgrace will replace their glory.
And they have to pay for everything, right? Even violence against nature, against Lebanon and its animals.
That detail is incredible. It shows a sensitivity to the full scope of their destruction, including the ecological impact of their campaigns.
And finally, woe number 5.
Idolatry. This brings it all home. It's the core spiritual offense, exchanging the glory of the sovereign Lord for worthless, mute idols that can't offer any guidance.
The craftsman trusts his own handiwork, making these mute, worthless things.
And these idols are called teachers of falsehood, because their very existence implies a lie, the lie that they can actually help humans. The craftsman trusts his own creation, which can't even speak.
And this brings us back to that broader definition of idolatry for today.
Right. It's whenever a person sets their priorities on the things that are made rather than on the maker. It's the difference between owning things and being owned by them.
So the section concludes with this ultimate contrast. You have these lifeless idols, and then you have the living God, Yahweh, in his majestic palace.
And because of that, the only proper response for all creation is silence. The whole earth is speechless in his presence. There's no need to try coax him to speak. He's already sovereignly active.
The lesson is complete for Habakkuk. God will intervene, the arrogant Babylonians will be brought low, and the just person's duty is now just to wait and endure.
Exactly.
So after hearing this certain doom of Babylon, which confirms God's ultimate justice, the prophet offers a final prayer, and it's this stunning emotional pivot.
It is. He moves from questioning God's policy to this absolute, unshakable conviction in God's power. It's the final step in his journey.
This final chapter, it's often called his confidence declaration, right? The vision of the divine warrior.
It is. It's this massive poetic contrast to the mute idols and the temporary power of the Chaldeans. He shifts from fearful questioning to heartfelt praise. He understands that even though hard times are coming, God is already victorious.
And he starts by remembering God's power in the past, in Israel's history. He says, Lord, I have heard the report of what you did. In our time, repeat those deeds.
He's asking for a modern miracle. But then he immediately adds that crucial request, acknowledging the pain that's coming. But when you cause turmoil, remember to show us mercy.
Which leads right into this magnificent vision of the divine warrior. It's meant to remind Habakkuk of the sheer omnipotence he's trusting in.
It is. God comes from Teman and Mount Paran, places associated with powerful manifestations of his presence. And the description is just. It's breathtaking.
His splendor covers the skies, the earth is full of his glory, his brightness is like lightning.
And his very approach causes chaos for his enemies. Plague and pestilence march before and behind him like escorts. His glance makes mountains shatter and hills collapse.
He's like a cosmic giant marching through the earth, trampling hostile nations like an ox treading grain.
He uses these overpowering weapons, a bow, arrows, a lightning-quick spear-all, to save his people and strike the leader of the wicked nation. This whole vision, this memory of God's power, is the antidote to his earlier despair.
But even with this assurance of God's power and Babylon's judgment, the prophet's immediate physical reaction to the coming invasion is its intense fear.
And this is so important. Habakkuk 3.16 captures this raw human reaction. He's still terrified of what's about to happen.
He says his stomach churned, his lips quivered, his frame went limp like his bones were decaying. He was shaking.
It's such a crucial detail. Faith isn't the absence of fear. It's resolve in the presence of fear. Even the prophet himself was physically terrified.
And his conclusion is one of surrender. He realizes God will handle the Babylonians just as he promised. All Habakkuk has to do is stand firm and wait, just like he was told in chapter 2.
He has nothing more to say except to trust. And this all culminates in the pinnacle of his faith, the unconditional vow that defines the whole book.
He declares that his strength and his joy come only from God, totally independent of his circumstances.
Which is the polar opposite of the greedy Babylonians, who lived only by sight and military might. Habakkuk then outlines the absolute worst-case scenario for his agrarian society, a total economic disaster.
This litany of loss.
You're just total ruin. When the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, when the olive trees do not produce and the fields yield no crops, when the sheep disappear from the pen and there are no cattle in the stalls.
It's the end of everything. Starvation is imminent.
And in the face of that total ruin, his response is a declaration of absolute independent joy. I will rejoice because of the Lord. I will be happy because of the God who delivers me.
His trust is completely unconditional. He has separated his internal spiritual condition from his external material reality.
And that final image is so powerful, of spiritual strength coming from physical weakness. He felt his legs shaking, his bones decaying, but he says the sovereign Lord is his strength.
God gives him the agility of a deer to navigate the rugged, perilous terrain.
Right. To walk through this dangerous, collapsed landscape as sure-footedly as a gazelle on a cliff edge, it's the ultimate confirmation. He will live by faith.
So what we've really distilled in this deep dive is, it's more than just a historical text. It's a blueprint for maintaining conviction in times of corruption and disaster.
It is. Habakkuk's journey is this incredible arc, from complaint to wrestling, and finally to this absolute unconditional commitment.
And the crucial issue, the one that transcends the 7th century BC, is this necessity of unwavering trust in God, even when he seems silent.
The prophet struggled with how a holy God could use wicked instruments for justice, but the answer was clarity. God's justice will come on his timeline. And faith, that mix of trust and integrity, is what will be preserved.
So the righteous person has to live by faith while they wait for that unfailing promise to be fulfilled.
And the relevance for you, the learner, is clear. We've anchored ourselves in this knowledge of God's eternal power and his ultimate promise of justice. Habakkuk found his inner strength by holding on to that decree, even when the timeline was delayed and the future was terrifying.
He found his final strength, that agility of a deer on a cliff, by consciously declaring his faith before the disaster struck, and regardless of the outcome. It's like saying, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done," even when earth feels like it's on fire.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to consider until our next deep dive. If we adopt that posture of Habakkuk, trusting in ultimate justice no matter what, what's the most profound personal or professional loss, the modern version of the fig, the olive, and the vine all failing, that you could endure right now without losing your inner core of strength?
Without losing your ability to declare joy. What does true unconditional faith demand of us when the foundations shake?
Something to think about.
Something to mull over as you navigate your own watch post. Thank you for joining us.